Hey, how you doing? Hope everything's good on your end because today I've got something that Civilization fans are going to want to hear about, and we're going to take our time talking through it together. I know a ton of people have been waiting for big updates and meaningful improvements to Civilization 7 since launch. And Firaxis has just dropped update 1.0.0114, also known as update 1.2.5. And honestly, it's one of the more substantial patches so far. It's not just a bug fix or some minor tweaks. This is a full feature update with new maps, new city-state categories, a complete leader rework, and even more additions to the Right to Rule collection. And what I really like about it is how it shows that the developers are actually listening to community feedback and pushing the game forward in ways that make it fresher, more exciting, and more strategic. So let's start by talking about something that has frustrated players for decades in the Civilization series, and that's map generation. Everyone knows that half of the fun in Civ comes from that moment when you start a new game, zoom out, and start exploring the map. But if you've played enough Civ games, you know maps can sometimes feel too predictable. This update introduces two completely new map types, one called Continents and Islands and the other called Pangaea and Islands. And they're exactly what they sound like. Continents and Islands creates more balanced separations of land masses, with enough islands scattered around to keep naval exploration and coastal settlement meaningful, while Pangaea and Islands lets you have that giant world-spanning landmass but breaks it up with little pockets of island play, which keeps domination and cultural strategies interesting because it doesn't lock you into just one style of expansion. What's cool is that Continents and Islands is now the new default for single-player games. That's a subtle but important design choice because it means Firaxis is encouraging more varied playstyles right out of the gate. They want people to be building ships, setting up trade routes across water, and thinking more about geography than just, oh, here's another giant chunk of land. Time to spam cities. Now, when we move over to settlements, the production system and how you manage what a city builds has always been a core part of Civ, but it's also been a place where the UI sometimes lags behind the complexity. Update 1.2.5 actually gives settlements a lot more clarity. If you've ever clicked into your production menu and thought, okay, I can build this district or this improvement, but I'm not exactly sure what it's really doing in the bigger picture, you're going to like these changes. The production menu now clearly shows base yields, adjacency bonuses, and how warehouses will impact things. That might sound like a small tweak on paper, but it's huge when you're trying to plan your empire efficiently. On top of that, when you go to place a new building, the game now gives you yield indicators and placement previews right there, so you're not playing guesswork. For years, Civ players have been manually calculating where a campus or industrial district should go for maximum adjacency. Now the game helps you visualize it, which doesn't dumb it down, but makes it more accessible and speeds up the flow of your turns. And when your city is about to grow or hit an important milestone, the update makes those events way clearer with before and after previews in the tooltip. It's one of those quality of life things that keeps you better informed without overwhelming you. Speaking of better informed, let's talk about city-states. Civilization 6 really put city-states on the map as strategic entities that could provide suzerain bonuses and create mini-diplomatic puzzles. Civilization 7 continues that tradition, but this patch expands it by adding two new categories of city-states, diplomatic and expansionist. That's a smart move because previously the city-state system sometimes felt a little boxed into predictable types, and you could almost always anticipate what you were going to get once you explored the map. With diplomatic and expansionist types entering the mix, now you've got fresh interactions. Diplomatic city-states obviously tie into influence, alliances, and non-military paths to victory, while expansionist city-states are all about growth and spreading out. For players who like to build empires based on settling vast areas of land, expansionist city-states are a gift because their suzerain bonuses and quests can push you further in that direction. It adds another layer of replayability because now each new game could steer your playstyle depending on which city-states spawn and where they're located. All right, now let's address the part that's probably going to stir the most conversation in the Civ community, and that's the rework of Napoleon. Reworks are always tricky because when Firaxis changes a leader's abilities, it messes with people's strategies. And if you've been someone who likes to rely on Napoleon for domination play, this update is going to feel different. Napoleon has gotten a full redesign. Without spoiling the entire detail list of his numbers and abilities, what you need to know is that the devs wanted to make him less one-dimensional and more strategically flexible. The old Napoleon could feel like he forced you into a single path, where you were either going full conquest or you weren't using him effectively. Now he's got a more dynamic toolset that still makes him a powerful leader on the battlefield, but doesn't pigeonhole him. It's one of those changes that will probably need a few weeks of community testing to see how strong he really is now. But at least it makes him feel fresh again. If you haven't played him in a while, this is your excuse to load up a new game and see how his new design feels. And then there's the Right to Rule collection. This update brings in some of the remaining content pieces from that set, including a new leader, Lakshmibai, and two new civilizations, Silla and Qajar. Adding Lakshmibai is a big deal because she brings another strong leader option with unique cultural and military dynamics. If you don't know her history, she was the Rani of Jhansi, a key figure in the Indian Rebellion of 1857, and her gameplay design reflects that mix of resistance and leadership. Silla, on the other hand, gives us a Korean kingdom with its own flavor of bonuses, likely leaning toward culture and science, while Qajar brings Persian influence with fresh mechanics. New civilizations always spark excitement because they completely shake up the meta. Anytime new civs drop, players rush to test them against the existing roster to see how they stack up in multiplayer and how viable they are for specific victory conditions. That alone makes this patch worth checking out even if you're not interested in the UI or map changes. Another important note from Firaxis is that some of the new abilities and effects won't show up correctly unless you start a new game or advance your existing save into the next age. That's just a limitation of how game systems are baked into saves, but it's worth pointing out. If you want the cleanest experience with everything this patch offers, you might want to start fresh. And I know some people hate hearing that because they're in the middle of a 15-hour run, but that's the trade-off when an update overhauls systems at this level. Also, for anyone running mods, Firaxis has acknowledged that some mods may not be compatible yet. So if you're seeing crashes or weird behavior after patching, try disabling mods and waiting for mod creators to update them. And if for some reason you want to keep playing on the old version, Steam users can access a legacy beta branch that lets you lock your game to the pre-patch build, which is nice for mod users who need more time. What I like about this patch is the overall direction it's pointing the game. Civilization 7 had a rocky launch in some ways because it felt like the foundation was there, but certain parts of the game just weren't deep enough or clear enough to keep hardcore Civ fans hooked long term. But with updates like 1.2.5, you can see the commitment to expanding the game's systems, refining the UI, and adding more variety so each playthrough feels unique. It's not just throwing in content for the sake of content, it's addressing core pillars of the experience: map generation, city management, city-state variety, and leader diversity. These are the elements that keep the game replayable for hundreds of hours, and if they keep building on this foundation with future patches, Civilization 7 could easily grow into the kind of fan favorite that Civ 6 became after Gathering Storm and multiple updates. Another thing I think is worth noting is how this patch changes the pace of play. With maps being more dynamic and city-states offering more categories, you can't just autopilot your strategy anymore. You've got to actually adapt to what the game is giving you, which is what makes Civ such a classic series in the first place. Every run should feel like a story, and Update 1.2.5 is adding more storytelling tools into that sandbox. Whether it's deciding how to take advantage of diplomatic city-states to push for a nonviolent win, or figuring out how to expand smartly across a map full of small islands, you're constantly faced with new choices that keep the game fresh. And of course, let's not forget the smaller fixes and quality of life updates that came with this patch. There are always a ton of bug fixes and balance tweaks under the hood, and while those don't always make flashy headlines, they do make the overall experience smoother.